Shalom, good afternoon from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Mr. Lowell Galin, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited. Welcome to episode 5 of our monthly Root and Branch Association Lost Tribes Fellowship Seminar, hosted by Fellowship Chairman Mr. Yair Davidiy, who is the founder of the Brit-Am and Hebrew Nations organizations and the World Authority on the subject of the lost tribes, friend of many years, and new friend, Mr. Steve Mathe from California, who is also a leader and organizing now. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. And Yair, without further ado, I hand over the mic. The subject for today's episode 5 is or are the Israelite origins of the kings of Denmark. And Yair, it's all yours. And thank you for inviting Steve and I to make comments or ask questions as you go along. So it's all yours, Yair.
Okay, so the Danish people are a part of the northern people. They're part of the Scandinavian peoples. And the Scandinavian peoples, to some degree, are intermixed with each other. So, or historically they were. Most of the Danes, in effect, once dwelt in southern Sweden. They moved from southern Sweden to what is now Denmark. And for most of their history, they were struggling with the Sweden over who was to control that section of southern Sweden. So, so you see, from this and from other factors, we see that what applies to one applies to the other. Nevertheless, the Danes of Denmark, we identify them with the tribe of Dan. They pertain to the Israelite tribe of Dan, whereas the other nations of Scandinavia we apply to other pertain to other Israelite tribes. I just go through them for a bit of background. We identify Finland with Issachar, Gad is Sweden, Dan is Denmark, Naphtali is Norway. There are also many from the tribe of Asher in Sweden and throughout Scandinavia. So that is something that we have. It's something that we prove. We have proven it because we proved in general we proved through tracing the migrations of the Israelite tribes. The Israelite tribes were in the land of Israel originally. There were 12 tribes of Israel. The ancestors of the Israelite tribes were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel. Jacob had 4 wives, as we know, and from these 4 wives he begat children, he begat sons, 12 sons, and these sons became the forefathers of the Israelite tribes. 12 tribes from 12 sons. And they went down to Egypt. In Egypt they were oppressed, subjugated by the Egyptians. They suffered in Egypt under Moses. They were led out of Egypt, out of Egyptian oppression, through the wilderness. In the wilderness they received the Torah. From there they progressed to come into the land of Canaan. They conquered the land of Canaan and divided up amongst the 12 tribes. It was a period of judges, of settlement, of adjustment, of problems, troubles, ups and downs, visitations, prophecies, and so on, until eventually we come to the time of Samuel. Samuel was the judge of Israel. He was the judge of Israel, and he appointed Saul, King Shaul, to become king. And Shaul was the first king of Israel. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. After Shaul came David, the son of Jesse, from the tribe of Judah, became the king of all Israel, of all of the Israelite tribes. After David came Solomon. Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem, and he ruled over all of Israel. Following Solomon, his son Rehoboam, in Hebrew Rehoboam, became king. And in his time, 10 of the 12 tribes seceded. They separated. They set up their own kingdom in the north. Their first king was Jeroboam ben Nebat from the tribe of Ephraim. And so there were 2 different polities, 2 different Israelite entities in the same area. The 10 tribes were in the north. Judah, the kingdom of Judah was in the south. The kingdom of Judah comprised Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, also minority groups from other tribes. And from Judah, the kingdom of Judah emerged emerged, the present-day Jewish people. Present-day Jewish people emerged from Judah, whereas the northern tribes were conquered by the Assyrians, taken away, taken to different portions of the Assyrian Empire, and even before being taken away, they were already Gentiles to all intents and purposes. They worshipped other gods. They had stopped the practice of circumcision. They did not really consider themselves, or was not certain to what degree they even identified as Hebrews before they were taken away. After being taken away, they forgot altogether, and they were forgotten by others, as were all Asian peoples of that time. All Asian peoples who were moved around, exiled, moved from one place to another. They all forgot their ancestry. None of them can trace where they came from, apart from the Jews, and the Jews were only able to trace their ancestry, to remember that they were Jewish, thanks to the Jewish religion. If they did not have the Jewish religion, they too would have been lost. So the lost in tribes were lost, their identity was lost, but physically they remained. And physically we can trace them, historically we can trace them. We can trace them to areas, first from the fringes of the Assyrian Empire, foothills of the Caucasus Mountains, places in Turkey and Armenia and so on, and from there they moved to the north, and they moved to the north of the Black Sea, and from there they eventually moved into Scandinavia, and also that was one major pathway of migration. Another pathway of migration was actually by way of the sea. There were people who settled in Scandinavia and in Denmark who had come through the Mediterranean Sea and then moved up along the northwestern coasts of Europe, also from the British Isles, into Scandinavia. And you may say this might seem something difficult to comprehend, to understand, to believe in, but archaeologists have found settlements on the borders of Denmark, showing Mycenaean ancient Greek remains from Crete, from the area of Cyprus, and also from Egypt, and the indications are that these were people. They were not people who had traded artifacts, but people they were bringing back their own native civilization, which belonged to the East Mediterranean area, which was the area of Israel. So we have archaeological evidence for this, and the settlement was quite heavy. And incidentally, it's worth noting that according to Pliny, a Roman geographer, an early Roman geographer, Scandinavia, one of the names of Scandinavia, possibly the major name of Scandinavia in that time, was Basil. Basil, in the time of the ancient Hebrews, so the time when the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Hebrews were all in their lands, according to cuneiform inscriptions, Basil was another name for the area of Bashan. Bashan was possibly another way of pronouncing the word Bashan. Bashan is the region east of the Jordan and a bit to the north. All that area is known as Bashan, also we find on the maps of Ptolemy. Bathanai, another way of saying Bashan for all that region. And Moses had blessed the tribe of Dan, that Dan would be a lion leaping from Bashan. So we can understand this prophecy of Moses as being a prediction that the tribe of Dan in the future would be in Scandinavia. Because Bashan is another name, is known as Basil. Basil is another way of pronouncing Bashan, and Basil was the name given to Scandinavia. And there were people from that area who did reach Scandinavia. So here we already have an indication that the people from Denmark are descended from Israelites. We find that the tribe of Dan in ancient times throughout the Middle East, at one stage they conquered Cyprus. The Albright this is accepted. It is accepted that the Assyrians referred to the Isle of Cyprus as Idanana, and Danana was another way of saying Dan. And the Danana also had in southeast Turkey, they had an area, as well as in the land of Israel, and where the present-day Gush Dan. Gush Dan is what in modern Hebrew we refer to the area around Tel Aviv. Yaffo, Petah Tikva, all that region is known as Gush Dan in modern Hebrew. Gush Dan meaning the area of Dan. That was the original region given to Dan when they came into the land. After that, we are told that they had trouble holding the land down. That they were oppressed by their pagan neighbours, and so some of them moved out. They moved to the northern Galilee, and also they moved to southeast Turkey. And this is what the Bible refers to the Danes, people from the tribe of Dan, moving out and going to Leshem in one source and to Laish in the other. And the commentators have often assumed that Laish and Leshem are one and the same place. If we look at it carefully, we see they're two different regions altogether. Leshem was in the Galilee, Dan in the Galilee. It's a very beautiful area. I assume you've been there, Aryeh. You've been to Tel Dan. It's very nice, very natural springs, beautiful vegetation. It has a calming atmosphere. It's also a mystical region. I was there a few times. I was there when I was served in the IDF in that region. We were camped there, and it's quite inspiring. Dan in the Galilee, but also in southeast Turkey, there too, we find an entity known as the Dananu, known as the Dana, and they are also to be associated with the tribe of Dan. Another offshoot of the tribe of Dan, is to be found in Ireland, where the Tuatha De Dana, the people of the goddess, or the god, actually the god Dan, were located, are referred to in ancient Irish mythology as having come from Scandinavia, as being associated with Scandinavia, and before that having been in the Middle East, having been in the area of Lebanon, which was also associated with the tribe of Dan. And this is what Irish mythology tells us, and having been of a very high level of culture, of civilization, of having much wisdom and skills, which is pertinent to the tribe of Dan, because the tribe of Dan in the Bible is also so described. When they built the tabernacle in the desert, in the wilderness, there was Bezalel from the tribe of Judah and Aholiab from the tribe of Dan. They were the true master craftsmen appointed to look after to building the tabernacle, which required a great deal of artisanship, of mastery, of manual crafts, of working with metals, working with precious goods, special material. So too, when Solomon built the temple, he sent to the king of Tyre, and he asked him, Hiram the king of Tyre, and he asked him to send him someone to help supervise the work. So the king of Tyre sent him a personage known as Huram. It's easy to get mixed up between the two names. Hiram and Huram look the same, but they're different. And Hiram, so you don't get confused, Hiram was the king of Tyre. Zor, that is the Phoenician city of Tyre, an important city of Tyre. Hiram was the king, and the personage he sent to Solomon was known as Huram. And Huram, the Bible tells us, both in the book of Kings and also in the book of Chronicles, putting the two sources together, that apparently his mother was from the tribe of Naphtali and his father was from Dan, but they dwelt in Tyre of the Phoenicians. And we see here that already the Danes were involved with Phoenician activities, so possibly identified with the Phoenicians. Some of the Phoenician seafarers and colonizers may have been from the tribe of Dan. Deborah, the prophetess Deborah, condemns Dan. She says, Dan, why do you dwell in ships? And so too, we find in Denmark that the peoples from the Middle East is now actually, we dismiss DNA, because DNA, we believe that DNA is determined more by environment than by hereditary in the long run. But the environment, but in the short run, it can tell us something. And now DNA findings are relating the people of Denmark, not the present-day people of Denmark, but the early settlers from the Vikings. Apparently most of their women folk came from the Middle East, according to DNA findings, and many of the men also came from the Middle East area and from the area of Turkey, those areas the tribe of Dan are settled in. And this is what DNA findings are telling us, and it also is against our present understanding of DNA, because these types and these DNA traces are not present amongst the ancient Danish population. Though physically, many people in Denmark must be descended from them. So the only solution is, the only explanation is that the DNA changes according to the environmental influences, in the same way as has now been proving that the physical features such as the colour of your skin, the colour of your hair, the colour of your eyes, your size, your head shape, and everything else that was once considered, it was once put down as scientific fact. You can still find it in old books on race, on old books on physiology, that these factors are hereditary and they are immutable. They've passed from father to son, generation after generation. It's now admitted that within 1 or 2 generations they change. It's statistically proven, and so that is what happened regarding physical features being inherited. So too the future will show us, I'm certain, already indications that such is the case. The DNA changes also can be affected in the same way, or in a similar way, or something parallel to that. So that is what we have. We also have that the peoples who settled in Denmark, Denmark was settled at several stages. At people in the Bronze Age, 500 BCE, or before then. And then after that, we also had people coming in 100 BCE, and more people coming in 500 BCE. There were several, and also later, 600 CE, 700 CE. In Viking times, people were still coming in and settling in Denmark, and they were coming from outside. But they all accepted the same language. They all assimilated the same cultural background. And they had a tradition that their ancestor was Dan the Great. Dan the Great, in other words, their ancestor was Dan. They named themselves after Dan. In the Bible, this was the trait of the tribe of Dan. We find the tribe of Dan. The Bible tells us that the people from the tribe of Dan went to this place, and they named it after Dan, their father. They went to another place and named it after Dan, their father. They camped in a certain place, and they named it Mahane Dan, the camp of Dan, after Dan, their father. So this was a tribal trait of theirs, to leave their name wherever they left in honour of Dan their father, and also they still name themselves today Dan. Denmark. Denmark means the border land of Dan, of the tribe of Dan, after Dan the Great, their father known as Dan the Great. So their very name indicates that they are descended from Dan. I'll take a few questions in a minute. I just wanted to make a remark on something that I came across this morning, which I find quite interesting. We find rabbinical sources analysing the characteristics of Dan say that Dan is as his name is. The name Dan in Hebrew means judgment, and they say that someone who is very officious, wants to take everybody to court over things that normal people would not do so, is probably from the tribe of Dan. And that Dan weighs things up and he judges things, and he has this even-headed, logical trend of mind, similar to as we find amongst lawyers. In fact, if you know any lawyers, you probably notice that they are a bit square-headed. They say that if something should be that way, they don't understand why it's not that way, because that is the way it's supposed to be. And they have trouble facing up to reality in that respect. So too, the Danes have this certain aspect in their character, but they are fair, they are socially minded, they are egalitarian, Also, in Denmark, there was never really any oppression of one by the other. There was no feudal system of serfdom, of slavery, and so on. Or if there was, it was very minor compared to elsewhere. And today in Denmark, as in most of Scandinavia, all of Scandinavia, the people are egalitarian. They care for everyone. Someone who doesn't work is looked after. He doesn't have to work. He doesn't if he doesn't really want to. But most of them do. They don't abuse the system. Someone who has a problem is helped. Even someone who goes to jail is looked after, is treated like a human being. And everyone has their rights and their obligations, and this is accepted as how things should be. In many ways, they are a model society. Despite a lot of faults and a lot of weaknesses and imperfections, we have much to learn from them. All of the world does. So, and they have this is characteristic of Dan of judging everything up in the scales of judgment, as a rabbi said concerning people from Dan. We find this in Scandinavia. So one point that I just found of interest, we notice in the Second World War. In the Second World War, the Danish people helped the Jews. The Germans conquered Denmark very easily because due to its geographical build, it was very difficult to defend themselves, so they gave in. They allowed the Germans to come in on conditions that the Germans would not interfere with their internal functioning. Whereas they would allow the Germans to buy agricultural produce and the rest from them, what was needed, and that was the agreement that they had. Meanwhile, the Jews in Denmark were afraid that the Germans would kill them. The Germans would kill them, move them out elsewhere, mistreat them, do what they were doing everywhere throughout Europe, treat them in such a way that eventually they would die. And so some of the Jews wanted to run away. Actually, they didn't have any place really to go to. Some of them, as individuals, could have gone to Sweden, but this was not so clear-cut. I had a friend who was actually in that situation, and he crossed the border into Sweden as a 16-year-old, and he was arrested by the Swedish police because as an infiltrator. But he was in jail for about 2 days, and then he was let out. But it wasn't accepted. So the Danish people, at all events, the Danish people said to the Jews, don't run away, don't cause panic, don't do anything that might cause the Germans to precipitately take action before they really intend to. We will worry about knowing when the time comes when the Germans are doing something, and we will get them out. And that's what they did. They took all of the Jews and they put them on ships. Danish philanthropists paid the people, the sailors who took them, the Danish sailors who took them across the sea to Sweden, were paid quite well for their trouble and for the risk they were taking. And half of the money came from the Jews themselves, and the other half came from Danish philanthropists. The actual physical action of getting the Jews together, of rounding them up and taking them, escorting them to the boats, and ensuring their safety, in other words, that was done by the Danish populace as a whole. Now, a Danish researcher of sociology, she did a study of people who had been responsible for this action, who had participated in it, and she found that there was a universal sentiment that there's such a thing as the law of Denmark, and everyone in Denmark, whether Jewish, non-Jewish, doesn't matter who they were, once they were accepted into the community of Denmark, they are the same, to be treated the same, and by the Germans seeking to victimize the Jews, to mark the Jews out, to take the Jews away, to treat them in a discriminating manner, actually to kill them, though it wasn't certain at the time, to kill them. The Germans, in effect, were transgressing Danish law, which they had unofficially agreed not to. Therefore, the Germans were at fault. Therefore, it was an obligation to prevent the Germans from doing this, from breaking Danish law, and that is the rationale they gave. There was also sentiment. They didn't. They sympathised with the Jews, and so did the Swedes. So did many people in the world. They sympathised with the Jews. They didn't want the Jews persecuted. The humanitarian feelings, but the rationale that they had was this: that the Germans were breaking Danish law, therefore they were to be defied. In other words, the bottom line was the law. Now, I saw in a quotation from the Kliyaka, thinking about 1600s, and he lived in Prague. He's a famous commentator on the Chumash, and Jacob, when he blessed the children, Jacob is another name for Israel. When he blessed his sons, he blessed all of the tribes, and in his blessing to Dan, he says, Dan shall be one of the shall judge as one of the tribes of Israel. So this the formulation of this expression is a bit difficult, but Kliyaka, he interprets it to say that Dan, when he comes to judge, Dan will be a judge when he comes to judge other people from the tribes. He will not show favoritism. He will not discriminate against someone who is not from his tribe. Whoever comes to be judged before someone from Dan will get equal treatment. He will be judged as the same as some from Dan. And this is how the people in the Second World War, the Danes in the Second World War, related to their Jewish neighbours. They regard them as fellow Danes, and therefore deserving, and it was an obligation to treat them the same as they would treat other Danes, and to look after them and protect them and help them escape the predators who were coming against them. You have anything, someone has something to say, a comment, questions?
I'll defer to Steve,
Okay.
who's our honored guest from California, and also knows something about what it's like to be a refugee, because he left Hungary with his mother at an early age. So the issue of fleeing a homeland and oppression is something he knows about.
Well, it's inspiring to hear the history of Danes, Scandinavians in general, but especially the Danes. I think that this information is so incredibly important. The information, I mean, the historical foundations of a country, because eventually, I think all of us here would like to see this information go out in general on a greater scale, so we can establish a substrate or a foundation, a historical foundation based on knowledge as to where the core of these people in the Western nations have come from. I think it's needed. So when the calling goes forth from the Almighty, there will be a foundation for it already. And they're going to say, oh yeah, I heard this this bearded guy talk on the internet about Denmark. What's his name? Davidiy, that's it. And he told us that, hey, we are really descended from one of the tribes of Israel. And I think this historical foundation is extremely important, and I look forward to it going out on a greater push, a greater scale in the future ahead. I think that's what needs to be done, and those of us who are in the movement, the 10 Tribes movement, need to support that so it can just expand out into the world. It is inspiring because it's, as I said, it's a foundation of what's to come later.
You're right. We just only for the moment. At the moment, we're concentrating on Denmark, and recent
Of
weeks
course.
have been working on the Scandinavian nations. But in principle, the tribes of Israel, it was prophesied with the blessing to the tribe that the tribes of Israel received was given to Abraham and to Yaakov and to Joseph, was that was to be taken over by the lost 10 tribes, in their places of exile, was that they would be extremely numerous, a great multitude of people on a world
Mm-hmm.
scale. And so we find the people from the tribes descended from Israelites. We trace them to North America, Canada, the USA, to Great Britain, offshoots of Britain, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all over the world. Also people in France, people in Switzerland, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, and also in the Scandinavian countries, and in Ireland, and the offshoots of the Irish.
Mm-hmm.
Amongst all of these, we don't say that all of these peoples are necessarily descend from Israelites, but a good portion of them are. People sometimes think that it's what will we do with all these people, or how can you want to say that so many people are descended from Israelites. So we don't. First of all, we don't say that all of them are. We don't
Of
really know,
course.
but the impression is that a good percentage of them are. And this was a prophecy that they would be so numerous as our research indicates them to be.
Yeah, the founders of these nations can be traced back to Israelitish tribes. Okay, so they may have been indigenous people there before, very, very few, because the Almighty has planned that those areas not be settled by other peoples in great numbers. So when Israelite tribes came in, they came into basically unpopulated areas relative to other areas in the world.
It's true. That's true.
People, by people who wrote nothing and built nothing. Sorry, but those are the foundation of a civilization and power. They were basically hunters and gatherers, so when Israelite tribes came into the Western Europe, it was basically empty, and those very few people, they were basically barbarians, and there was no big opposition to it. Same thing in North America and the Americas. It's just those people were just placeholders, and those who came in established the nations. They are we know as the Western nations. They
so
were
so too in Australia.
Israelitish tribes that founded them.
That's right. That's correct. So too in Australia, there were very few people. Or this was actually in Isaiah 49. He says that part of the promise to the tribes to Joseph, the tribes of Joseph, is that they would inherit the waste, the desolate places, the uninhabited
Yes.
areas. And relatively speaking, that's what these regions are compared to other areas, especially compared to their potential, what they could have been, what they were proven to be later.
Among the 10
Right.
nations.
I have a question, Yair, regarding Denmark. Would you please say something, because we still have about 20 minutes before we conclude our program, about the traditions of Israelite origin of the royal family or families of Denmark, the kings of Denmark. Would you say something about that specific?
Well, actually, we wrote articles about concerning the kings of Denmark and the royalty of Scandinavia in general, but we don't have the same traditions as we find, according to certain claims concerning the royal house of the English, even though all of the royal houses of Europe were interrelated with each other. But we do find points of interest. The people of Denmark, even before the Danes got there, that is, as we said before, the Danes moved in. They moved in by stages. Present-day people. At first, the area. If you look at a map, you have Denmark is actually a peninsula jutting out into the sea. And beside the peninsula there are islands, very large islands and smaller islands. And it is to the south of Norway and to the east of Sweden. So the main land area of Denmark is this peninsula. This peninsula is known as Jutland. And originally the Jutes lived there. And the Jutes were in that area. And when the Angles and the Saxons and the Frisians moved out of Western Europe and invaded England, the Jutes went with them. And apparently all together en masse they moved out of that region, moved out, attached themselves to the Anglo Saxon invaders, participated in the invasion of England, and settled in Kent in the south of England, which is now the richest and most fertile, most prosperous area of England, traditionally the centre of English civilization. That was from the Jutes. The Jutes were there. And after the Jutes moved in, the Danes, who that before then had been in southern Sweden, moved in, or they moved in more than they had before. And they took it over and they settled there. And the Jutes, according to Danish tradition, an old Danish text from about the 1200s, 1300s, but it was published later, about 2 centuries after that. It says that the Danes are descended from the tribe of Dan, and the Jutes were descended from the tribe of Judah. The word Jutes in Scandinavian pronunciation, Jut is the same, is a possible pronunciation of the name Judah. The two words are interchangeable, in effect. In other words, the Jutes were known as Judah, is another name for Judah. And there it says the Jutes were from Judah, and the Jutes and the Angles and the Danes were brothers. And it gives other indications of Israelite origin according to this tradition. And we find even in the land of Israel that Judah and Dan were intertwined, intermixed, were often participated in similar endeavors from the very beginning, from the time when they built, when someone from the tribe, an artisan from the tribe of Dan, an artisan from the tribe of Judah, got together and were appointed to build the Mishkan, to build the tabernacle in the wilderness, and all during their history, when the land of Israel, the very first Dan, the tribe of Dan, was settled, there was neighbors to Judah. Samson, the Danish hero, the great, big, strong man, and incidentally the Danes are known for being strong. Compared to the area they live in, they are strong and healthy to an above average degree, and their health and running and exercise are very popular amongst the Danes. And the Saxo Grammaticus says that the Danes in his time, the Middle Ages, were known as the strongest people in Europe. And even now they are quite healthy, quite vigorous. So they are quite vigorous. So the Danes also were in the land of Israel. They were associated with Judah, accompanied Judah. Samson had, according to the Midrash, he had a Jewish mother. His mother was from Judah, his father from Dan. And the future Messiah will have will be very similar. He will have a similar constitution to Samson. Samson is even seen in some ways as a prototype of the future Messiah. The future Messiah, according to this, will have a mother from the tribe of Dan, or another version says from the tribe of Naphtali. Dan and Naphtali were the two brothers, two sons from the same mother, from Bilhah, the maidservant of Rachel. So this Midrash says that the father of the Mashiach ben David, the future Messiah, will come from Judah, whereas his mother will come from Dan. Another point it's worth noting that concerning Jacob, as we said, he had 4 wives. Two major wives were Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah were 2 major wives, so sisters, daughters of Laban, sisters, and they were Jacob, who's renamed Israel, married both of them. From Leah he begat 6 sons. From Rachel, the sister of Leah, he begat 2 sons, Benjamin and Joseph. And from the 2 maidservants, Zilpah and Bilhah, he begat 2 sons each. From Bilhah, the maidservant of Rachel, he begat Dan and Naphtali. From Zilpah he begat Gad and Ashur. So we have Gad and Asher from Zilpah, Dan and Naphtali from Bilhah. The sons of the maidservants, they are the ones who dominate. They are the major tribes we find in Scandinavia. In fact, most of Scandinavia is populated. The Israelites in Scandinavia are Israelite descendants of the 10 tribes in Scandinavia. All belong to tribes from the maidservants. So there's some significance in this. We also find when they were encamped around the wilderness, Dan was in the north. And the Midrash says Dan is in the north where darkness comes from. Dan, but in the northern Scandinavia, you have cold, dark winters. There was sometimes known as the area of darkness. And this, according to the Midrashim, was the area where the lost tribes were to be found in. And one of them, so Dan was in the north, and Dan was Dan, Asher, and Naphtali were the 3 tribes in the north. The 10 tribes were divided into 4 different groups. Each group had 3 tribes in it. The northern group was Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, and Dan, Asher, and Naphtali are the major tribes who dominate Scandinavia. So as if we see some type of prophetic fulfillment, as if things are following a set pattern dictated by divine providence, which also is significant. It helps confirm our findings. It doesn't actually prove anything on its own, but it helps confirm the other evidence that we have. When we put everything together, we find a strong indication of Israelite ancestry. And Dan was always known, the tribe of Dan was always one of the tribes, one of the peoples always known to have kings. Kings of Denmark, kings in the Danish areas, so most of the Danish peoples go right back to 500, 600 CE. And the present rulers of Denmark, they can trace themselves to at least about 700 CE, 800 CE. They belong to one of the oldest dynasties in the world. If not, they can actually have can actually trace their genealogy that far back, and they've already been that way inclined. And we're also finding the blessings to Abraham, the blessings to Abraham concerning kings. He was promised that from his offspring would come kings. And when we look at the blessings, the blessing doesn't say kings and there's one king after another. It says kings of peoples, kings and kings of peoples. And according to the Aramaic translations and other sources, and also from the simple Hebrew text, when you look at it closely, it is indicating there would be kings ruling parallel to each other, kings of different peoples, that the Israelites, the offspring of Abraham, would be separate peoples, comprised separate peoples, each one with a king, or with a portion of them having kings, ruling over each other and parallel to each other. And this is what we find throughout Scandinavia. We find the kings in the Scandinavian nations. This is a fulfillment of the blessing. We should note, perhaps it's with a prosaic point of interest, not really connected to what we're talking about, but worth knowing about, concerns the present dynasty of Denmark. What happened was that Denmark was the throne of Denmark became vacant. It was in danger of becoming vacant. So they took someone, the ruler of Schleswig-Holstein, or province of Schleswig-Holstein, that is in Germany, but neighbouring on Denmark, at one time ruled by Denmark and considered part of Denmark. Actually, Denmark went to war with Prussia over it, but lost. But historically, it was considered part of Denmark, and part of the population did come from Denmark. So the ruler of this area, he married an heiress connected to the throne of Denmark, and he became the king. He became the king of Denmark, and he became the king of Denmark. Meanwhile, Norway was ruled by the king of Sweden. In other words, the king of Sweden was also the king of Norway, and it came to the point where the Norwegians didn't like this arrangement, because it wasn't. They felt that Norway, they didn't mind the king so much, but they felt that the Norwegian government, the Swedish government, wasn't giving them an even deal, or they could do better on their own, because they themselves were important people, an important merchant, one of the major merchant enterprises in the world. Incidentally, when Deborah said concerning Dan, why is Dan dwelling in ships? In other words, Dan was known as a ship-faring tribe from the very beginning. And today, Denmark, even though it has a relatively small population, only 6 million people, 6 million people, or approximately, it is one of the fourth, I think, the fourth largest ship owner enterprising nation in the world. So even now, that is a major stay, a major contributor to the Danish economy and to Danish culture, this ship-going tradition. Getting back to the king. So this king, so we had the Norway was looking for a king, and they considered the princes from Sweden, princes from Denmark itself, but they couldn't decide on anyone until they came to the king of Denmark. And when they came to the king of Denmark, you had the king of Denmark, the ruling king of Denmark. And then you had his son, who was the heir apparent, the crown prince, who would become king when his father died. And he also had a son. He had two sons. And one of his sons would succeed the crown prince when the time came. And he had a younger brother. And the younger brother had two advantages. One, he already had a son, that if they make him king and he suddenly dies, they won't have problems of succession. It's a problem that they had had in the past of choosing a new king all over again, because he would already have someone waiting for him to inherit the crown after him. And he was married to Queen Maud of Wales. She was the daughter of Edward VII of England, and then Great Britain was the strongest country in the world, and Britain ruled the waves. And if Norway ever got into any trouble or had any complications, it would be very, very useful, very useful, very convenient if their ruling monarch was related to the King of England, because the King of England had influence in England. And to have influence in England was an important plus for this monarch. So he is made the king. He became the king. Became the king of Norway. So he became the king of Norway, and he was the king of Norway, where his grandfather was the king of Denmark. His grandfather passed away, and his father became king of Denmark. So he was the king of Norway, and his father was the king of Denmark. Then his father also passed away, and his elder brother, Crown Prince of Denmark, became king. So the king of Norway and the king of Denmark were brothers, and when World War II broke out, the king of Denmark and the king of Norway were brother monarchs, and they both did a lot to help their people. They helped the Allied cause. They were very, very significant people in their own right. The king of Denmark was known to be friendly to the Jews. An acquaintance of mine is the son of a rabbi, the chief rabbi or major rabbi in Denmark, and he was personally acquainted with the king of Denmark. He used to meet him every day when they went for a walk in the morning. For his health, the king of Denmark would ride around on his horse. They would say hello to each other and exchange greetings and have a chat on occasion and so on. So this king of Denmark was concerned for the good welfare of his Jewish subjects. And in 1942 he was reported as saying that if the Germans try and enforce the decree to so that all the Jews have to put the Star of David on their shoulders, as they had been obliged to do in other parts of Europe, then he would put one on his own shoulder. And this is a true story. There are those who say that it's a legend, it's an urban legend, but it was reported in the press at the time, and it is even if it's not true, it is apocryphal insofar that such behavior was characteristic of him. It was something that you could believe, see him doing and see him saying. It was appropriate to his character. So this shows us something concerning the people of Denmark, a brighter side, a more enlightened, a brighter, a positive side to the characteristics of the Danish people. I didn't really answer your question, Lowell, but
No, that was very helpful. What I wanted to know, or what I had in mind, was in many of these European countries, there have been fights between various aristocratic families over who sits on the throne, going back centuries. The Tudors, and that's what I wanted to know. In Denmark, is there Germany had the Hohenzollerns, the Habsburgs, the Romanovs. In each of these countries, there were old families which weren't always sitting. Uneasy lies the head which bears the crown, is an expression like that.
no,
They weren't always there that long before someone chopped off someone's head or threw them out the window of the palace and someone else took over. So what I was getting at, I should have been more clear, was in Denmark, how the current ruling family, royal family, how far back they go. For example, the Windsors, who aren't they're not British at all, the Saxe-Coburg Gotha, go back, to William of Orange or something. And I personally would be very happy to see a British aristocratic family on the throne of England, ditto for Wales, Ireland, and Scotland. And this crew go to Transylvania, to Dracula's castle, where this is not a joke. One of them goes there several times a year. Look it up, and don't come back, because England is a total mess in every way in the very, very highest levels. Let's leave that out. So, Hamlet, something's rotten in this state of Denmark. This one kills that Hamlet's father, and Hamlet gets even. The family in Denmark, how long does it go back? And before you answer, I read once that anyone who is anyone in the world of European royalty, true or false, traces their family trees back to Charlemagne, and he claimed he was from the house of David. Now, I have no idea if I know he's very friendly to the Jews of his kingdom, and two of his bishops, I think, converted to Judaism, which annoyed the Catholic Church very much. And was Charlemagne from the royal house of David? I have no idea. Are the royal families of Europe really from Charlemagne? I have no idea. It's not a field I've really researched. So that's what I was getting at, especially for the Hamlets out there. How far back does this royal family go before someone chopped someone's head off or threw someone out the window or put poison or put a pillow on them when they were oversleep? That's what I was getting at.
Well, going by the father, by paternal lineage, it goes only back several generations until we had this aristocratic ruler of a province in Schleswig-Holstein, who nevertheless was related to the kings of Denmark and to the other monarchs of Scandinavia. And when there was no perceivable heir to the throne, he was chosen. He was asked to become one. And after that he married the niece of the previous king. So if you want to be precise, you could say he goes way, way back, because anyway, his ancestors before them were also from the kings of Denmark, were also related to the kings of Denmark. That every one of them is interrelated with each other. But on the whole, the very earliest monarchs of all the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, in the beginning, the kings were chosen out of one could say, out of a larger family. You would have a large family of royals or people associated with royalty, and when one king died, it would not automatically be his son, or even a member of his family would be chosen, but they would get together and they would choose someone the most suitable person out of this royal family or this royal group of people to take his place. And eventually this evolved, that then they changed that to similar as it was in other countries, that the throne would pass from father to son. But on the whole, even despite that, they always managed. Usually, there was very compared to other countries. There were no big civil wars. There were no major upheavals. There were no major confrontations, or very few of them. When one king died, they found someone to succeed him, and there's a fiction here and there, but it usually went very smoothly. They managed to work together. That's one of the characteristics, not only of the Danes but also of other Scandinavian nations. They managed to work together. They're civilized. They're, relatively speaking, very civilized, possibly the most civilized as far as in things like that are concerned, people on earth. They negotiate, they sit down, they don't go around killing each other for nothing.
Well, this has been a Yair, a very illuminating program. We've come to the end of our hour now, so I want to thank you for your talk on the Danes and also especially on the Israelite origin of the kings of Denmark.
You have a special calling. You're in a class by yourself. There isn't anybody like that. You're grounded in the Torah, and that's where we, the 10 tribes, need to be grounded in. And your mission is a prophetic mission, and it's part of the greater end time work of Hashem in the spirit of Eliyahu Hanavi. So we have to sponsor you. So we're praying for your health, for your inspiration, your strength, and everything that you need in these latter days to get this mission underway. I think that you have been at this for a very long time, and we're coming to the point where it really needs to just spread out in a much bigger way. And you're coming from let me tell you, you're coming from the historical and the biblical foundations of orientation, and where I'm coming from is acknowledging all of that, all of that, and coming from the spiritual restoration that needs to be done among the pioneers of the returnees from the 10 tribes.